Welcome to a new video on AlHuTV. Today for you, the Roborock Qrevo Curv 2 Flow. It's brand new on the market and super interesting because this robot comes with some really cool features, among other things, and this is very important. And for me, a highlight is of course the so-called SpiraFlow roller mop system. That's what it's called. This ensures that the roller at the back, which picks up the dirt here, is wiped off. And then the whole thing is refreshed. The roller is moistened with clean water, so we consistently get a clean mopping result. You can also see it here on the underside. You can see this roller, which of course has a few more advantages. Here we have a significantly stronger contact pressure, 2.5 times higher than normal. And all of this, as I said, so in numbers, that means we have 1.5 kilograms of contact pressure here and 220 revolutions per minute. The entire roller is 27 centimeters wide and in the end provides exactly enough surface area that we can cover directly here. So super interesting. We'll definitely take another look at that. Of course, we also have what's called the roller shield here. That means we have a shield here for when we go onto the carpet. We'll also take a closer look at that. Naturally, it gets lifted up. What's also super interesting is the so-called dirt tagged feature we have here, where it automatically adjusts the suction power if there are crumbs, but also if it detects moisture, then it automatically at the front. The so-called rotors for picking up debris here are raised, and also in the middle, and then it just mops. So it does all of that fully automatically. And as I said, those are just a few highlights, and we're going to take a closer look at them together now, a bit more closely. Yes, I've already mentioned a few things here. I think we can still pick up right there though. As I said, I'd like to start here with you, first with the rubber, then right away. Just continue. So the whole thing is like this. We have this compartment here, the roller underneath. Let's take a look at it directly under the camera so you can get a better idea of how the whole thing works. Here. So here we can see the roller. I want to explain to you a bit more about how it works. To do that, I'll show you the whole thing. Here we can see the brushless motor that we have. But we can also see here, very important, these nozzles are installed here, which moisten the whole thing. Here everything is scraped off. You can remove this part for cleaning. I think it's really well done that you can disassemble everything here quite easily. Here is the collection container, which is then emptied automatically as well. Here you can also see the connection, and then the whole thing is disassembled. You can also maintain the whole thing very easily. And above all, as I said, the wiping result and how it works is pretty straightforward. The dirt is picked up, scraped off, and then moistened again. And we continuously wipe with a clean roller, which consistently delivers the cleaning performance. In my example here, it's dried on cocoa powder, really sticky even when it gets wet again. Here it goes over it and wipes everything up without any problem. In the process, the roller spins at 220 revolutions per minute. Naturally, it rotates in the opposite direction to the direction of travel, so it really picks up everything, and it applies a contact pressure of 1.5 kilograms. And what we also have, which is very important, is a 270 millimeter wide roller. And it's longer than standard rollers you usually find. Of course, that's also very important, so that with each wipe, you can cover the largest possible area and thus significantly improve cleaning efficiency. Now, as I mentioned earlier, that's why I'll stick with it for a moment. I'm talking about the so-called dirt tagged. Here, we also have the ability to detect the level of dirt. For example, if we had liquid here, as in my example, the robot would automatically detect it and, as mentioned, lift the front brushes accordingly. But it also lifts the one in the middle, which it uses for suction. And then it only wipes over this hotspot. At the same time, I have also activated the feature so that when the container or the roller gets relatively full, or when the level of dirt becomes too high, it will automatically clean again, go back to the spot, and continue cleaning. This whole thing is an option that you can activate, but you can also let it mop everything in one go, however you prefer. For demonstration purposes, I used both methods here, and as I said, even after the first pass, it's super clean, but if you want it even more thorough, you can definitely go for this option. And activating the whole thing in the app is relatively simple. I'll show you again later, and then it cleans the roller once more and finishes mopping completely. So it's all super easy. And above all, what I really like about Roborock is that the whole process is fully automatic. You don't have to constantly readjust or intervene manually. It detects this spot fully automatically. Alright, now I'm going to reassemble everything so you can see it again. So you can take it out for maintenance and then you can just put it back in here. As I said, it's just as easy to put back in as it was to take out. Just insert it the right way around, like this. And then you can reattach the roller here, and that's it. Done, just like that. And with that, the whole thing is fully maintained if you want. So now you've at least seen how easy it is to take apart. Of course, I should mention this drying lid I just mentioned. It actually recognizes it using the camera up front here. We'll talk about that camera in more detail later. So these aren't sensors in the usual sense, but actually the camera here. It also takes a picture of it. I've also activated the whole thing so I can show it to you right here. You can actually see what it detected because of the reflection, apparently. How you do it, the camera handles it all. Of course, that's also supported by AI. And then the whole thing is processed by the program like this. Then it's activated, so it cleans that spot. So it really works great. Let's stick with the robot for a moment before we move on to the camera. Then of course we have our suction brush here, which you can see right here. You can also clean and wash it, of course. As you can see, it looks clean. Why does it look clean? That's actually pretty simple. We also have an anti-tangle feature here, which works really well. But let's stick with vacuuming for now. I vacuumed the whole thing here. Here too it recognizes, using the camera and this so-called dirt tag, that it detects this spot in vacuum mode accordingly. It then increases the suction power. I can show you this as well. He does this using the camera. In fact, it takes a picture before it does that. As I said, you can activate it, but you don't have to. And the whole thing is also saved offline. That's perhaps another very important quick note. Just a heads up. And then it does this spot cleaning. That definitely works wonderfully. As I said, you can activate it here. I left it on and I think it's pretty good. The detection has also worked every time in all my tests. So there were absolutely no problems if you want to have the whole thing here as well. Yes, and the suction power is not only good on hard floors, but of course also on carpets. Here too I scattered some crumbs. And here as well it cleaned the carpet completely without any problems. It cleaned everything thoroughly and didn't leave anything behind. We have a suction power of 20,000 pascals here, which is definitely a strong suction. It really doesn't leave anything behind. Yes, and I already mentioned the tangle issue, so I'd like to touch on that again. As I always do, I spread dog hair on the carpet. I scattered the dog hair here. I also recorded the whole thing in one take so you can see it. When I turn the robot over, you can see that with this so-called anti-tangle system we have here from Roborock, which has already proven itself in all other models as well. It works perfectly here, and once again it showed absolutely no problem for our robot. Of course, I should also mention that we tested the whole thing not just with the main brush, but also with the side brushes. Here too, we had no trouble at all picking up hair. So it really works perfectly, but maybe I didn't emphasize the roller enough earlier, so I'd like to touch on that again. Of course, we have an extendable roller here. Maybe that didn't really come across just now. It extends all the way to the edge, so we can mop right up to the edge as well. Maybe I mentioned that a bit too briefly earlier, or not enough because we were focused on cleanliness here. But that's also part of it, namely cleaning along the edges. And as I said, we clean right up to the edge here. And with this roller, it works really well. Truly excellent. And as for carpets, of course, we don't want the carpet to get wet. And here you can use the roller as well, because the roller runs over the carpet so that we don't have to set it down. There's what's called the shield here. The shield extends out here and ensures that it is slightly raised, up to 15 millimeters in fact. And then the shield extends so that the carpet doesn't get wet here. In my case, with a very short carpet, that's really not a problem. If you have a slightly higher carpet, like a high pile carpet that's a bit thicker, then it wouldn't matter how high it lifts. The roller would still be touching it the whole time. That's not really a problem in itself. If the roller carries a bit of dirt with it, you could end up getting the carpet dirty. That doesn't happen here. That's thanks to this so-called roller shield we have here, and it works wonderfully. It detects the carpet using the ultrasonic sensor, and as mentioned, the robot then responds with this shield. Let's take another look at that. We can also lift the shield here by hand. Then you can see it. That's what it looks like. So now I was working a bit against the motor, but it's just a small servo motor. And you can see here the whole thing is almost closed. And when we're driving here, with the carpet coming from this direction, it really stays dry. It also picked up the entire brush here, and nothing else happens here either. Then you can move it back again. So as I said, normally you wouldn't do this by hand. As I mentioned before, the ultrasonic sensor is installed here, of course. That's the fall protection, no need to mention it, that's standard by now. And the robot, as I said, is a mega tablet. Mega suction power 20,000. Pascal also cleans super thoroughly. Let's move on to the camera. What I really like about the camera, and this is in our practical example here, is that when I set up all the obstacles, the camera is very likely to recognize which objects it finds, takes pictures of them. As I said, I have this feature activated, but you don't have to if you don't want to. Here we have an AI-powered camera that recognizes these things. And also here in my experiment, based on the floor objects I set up, it worked wonderfully, of course. It drove around them. It does that perfectly. The camera also has to work this well, because for this dirt tag feature, it needs to recognize where things are so that it can adjust the cleaning accordingly. So this really works great. It's really fantastic here, drove perfectly around the objects, and also, maybe as another example, just in the living room if you let it run. Even there or in the kitchen, it drives wonderfully. There's really nothing to complain about. The camera works perfectly. And as I said in my example, the dirt tag feature also worked perfectly at the same time. The mopping result was outstanding, you just have to say that. Even the 20,000 pascals really left nothing to be desired here. Now I've really raved quite a bit about the test baker. Now let's briefly talk about the base station. In terms of appearance, I really like the base station. I think it's inspired by the 70s, but nonetheless, I really think the design is cool. Of course, here we have a dirty water tank and a clean water tank, as well as a dust bag compartment, which is located inside here. We have a status indicator here. LED, if there's no water, it's red. If there's water, everything is fine, or if there's no container. If it's full, then it's good to go. I think when it's white, it either blinks or stays on continuously. Yes, that's relatively simple. And then down here, we already have the roller, which gets washed here. The whole process is done at 75 degrees, which also ensures hygienic cleanliness. And afterwards, it is dried at 55 degrees. Hot air dried. That's how I would put it. So 75 degrees hot wash, 75 degrees hot wash, 55 degrees hot air drying. Goodness gracious, that was a lot of temperatures just now. So, and as I said, the whole thing is super smart. And speaking of smart, that's why I'm already looking over there. I've put my smartphone down. We want to take a quick look at the app again. You can still adjust a few things there. I'd also like to quickly show you that. Yes, let's take a look at the app together. I'll bring it up again now. The Qrevo Curv 2 flow is nicely named up here. You can also see my map here, which I created. You can already see where it last went, what it saw. Normally, if it recognized objects, you would be able to click on them here, just like I showed you in the example case. What it recognizes there, and then you could click on it, but that doesn't stay saved permanently. Instead, if it starts a new process, it deletes them. In this case, it didn't see anything here because I was just testing something on the carpet. As I said, I tried out a lot of things. Everything really worked perfectly here. Otherwise, we already know the whole thing. Here we have the option to set things up. Vacuum, then mop, then vacuum and mop. You can also customize it individually if you want. That's also possible. You can set a signal tone, different languages and so on. That's really not an issue at all. We know all of that too. It really works great. Also room zone program, that would work too. As you can see, I can even get help here thanks to the AI that's integrated up here. Alright, now I'm pretty much done here. Let's stay here for now. So, and then I have plans, maintenance, and of course I can see the consumption of the individual components I have here, or when something needs to be cleaned. Carpet settings. Now it gets a bit more interesting. You already know all this. Here we have the option to avoid the carpet if we want to. But we can also cross over it here. We can increase the suction power here. We can also activate the liftable motorized mop holder here, and so on and so forth. That makes everything perfect. I think I mentioned earlier as well that just like with the dirt tag, it automatically lifts everything, but conversely it also lifts the rear roller if it's only vacuuming. So I think that's understandable here too when it comes to carpet detection. Yes, it adapts itself accordingly. With floor detection, now we're getting to what I mentioned earlier, which is why I'd like to show it. You can activate automatic remopping, deep cleaning for heavy soiling, I activated it to try it out, then deactivated it because I didn't need it anymore later on. Actually, I can recommend just leaving it turned on. I've now seen that it just washes the roller again and goes over the area once more if it detects that the dirt level is too high. I think that's great. You can really just leave it on. You can adjust the cleaning pattern. You know how it is, if the tiles are laid crosswise, it goes clack, 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 because it drives over them with the wheels every time, of course. You can also have it run along the length of the tiles. The advantage is that it might not make that clacking sound as often, but as I said, that's not a must. You can also do a separate pet cleaning mode. You can even track your pet with it. You can take pet photos as well. I skipped that feature. That's not really my thing, to be honest. It's just not for me, I have to say. Because it actually stresses the dog out when the robot drives over to it. But still, it's an option. Yes, you can also adjust the obstacle avoidance again. That's a high level of coverage. As I just mentioned, you can activate the pet feature here and take snapshots. As I said, that's an option. Eye environment detection, that's something else you can do. And of course, the most noticeable thing is the so-called floodlight that we have up front. That works really well, of course. If the lighting conditions are poor, the floodlight, automatically turns on to help. Yes, and I've also enabled the option above to take photos of obstacles. I've done that now for my tests. By default, however, it is deactivated. Yes, our Roborock is now being presented at the CS just now and is expected to arrive here in Germany in the first quarter. That means it will also be released under 2 different names, which isn't a big difference, but just so you know, if you end up buying it at MediaMarkt, you'll have this X at the end. So Qrevo Curv 2 Flow X. And don't let yourself get confused, it's basically exactly the same, just sold under 2 different names. Definitely stay tuned, it'll be available in the first quarter and then you'll also be able to find it in stores here. A really, really cool model, I have to say. And it's definitely worth it. Speaking of worth it, you have the chance to read everything again in the description below. Everything is linked there. And of course, as always, you can leave a comment if you have any more questions. That would also be super important, of course. And leaving a subscription and a like would be great too. Also, hyping it up would be awesome. Yeah, and above all, I'll say it again down below. Everything is linked again in the description. Take another look at everything and read through it all at your leisure. You'll definitely see that it's really an awesome model. And yes, Roborock definitely doesn't have to hide. It's right up there at the top. I hope I was able to give you some insight. From Greece, Qrevo Curv 2 Flow. And of course, tune in again next time for the next model on AlHuTV.